Good Shabbat, everyone. Some of you may know that this month, the month of May, is Mental Health Awareness Month in the United States. And so, in honor of this occasion, we are welcoming Dr. Elizabeth McIngvale to Congregation Beth Yeshurun. Dr. McIngvale is a very impressive individual. Let me tell you a little bit about her. She is the director of the McLean OCD Institute at Houston, a Harvard Medical School affiliate, where she maintains an active clinical research and leadership role. Her clinical interests focus on OCD, anxiety disorders, mental health stigma, and access to mental health care. She's the founder of the Peace of Mind Foundation, a nonprofit foundation dedicated to OCD. She also operates OCDchallenge.org, a free self-help website for OCD, which is live in 6 languages and serves thousands of individuals. She was the first ever national spokesman for the International Obsessive Compulsive Foundation and now serves on their board of directors. She received her bachelor's and master's degree in social work from Loyola University in Chicago and her PhD in social work at the University of Houston. And to top it off, she's currently pursuing her MBA from Kellogg School of Business Management in Northwestern University. Dr. McIngvale engages in advocacy, clinical work, research, and teaching related to OCD and anxiety disorders. She's a renowned speaker on both the local and national level, speaking on behalf of OCD, mental health, and mental illness and mental health stigma. She's received numerous awards for advocacy and impact on the mental health field and currently serves as a director on 5 boards. She is truly internationally known and recognized for her clinical work and also for advancements in the OCD field. She's dedicated to giving a voice to the voiceless and is grateful for a career which allows her to improve the lives of those living with the mental illness every day. We're honored to welcome her and her brother and sister-in-law, James and Amanda. I think your nephews just left the room, but that's okay. Please welcome Dr. Elizabeth McIngvale.
Thank you for having me. It is an honor to be on a stage of a place where so many of us search for hope, help, and hopefully healing. It is 2023, and I'm so excited to say that in the past 7 days, I've now been able to speak to large Christian churches and a congregation, which to me is evidence alone of the work that we're starting to do. When I grew up here in Houston, Texas, in the suburbs, and what you would call a pretty normal lifestyle. I was a competitive gymnast, did pretty well academically, and had friends from the outside. There's nothing you would say was wrong. I had little quirks. I would track the weather and tell my parents if there was a tornado in Topeka, and I would say things like, "There's a tornado in Topeka, you can't leave the house today." My parents' response would be, "Well, we live in Houston, we gotta go to work." Or I would start at the book, I remember I was reading the book Matilda, and I would start at page 0 every time. And my mom, I remember, turned to me at one point and said, "Liz, you can use a bookmark." And I couldn't shake the feeling of starting in the middle, of not starting fresh. It just didn't feel right, it felt uncomfortable. But again, those were quirks. There was nothing else that would have made you say something's wrong, we need to do something. Until we had to do something. And it was really clear that something was wrong. By the time I was about 13 years old, my OCD started to impact every area of my life. I was dealing with these unwanted, scary, horrific, intrusive thoughts, and I thought that if I didn't do these repetitive behaviors or actions, something terrible would happen to the people that I love. The problem is that in school, in our house, in my community of faith, we didn't talk about mental health. And so I was terrified of what was going on, and I was even more terrified of what that would mean or what would happen if people found out. And so I continued to suffer in silence. And what we know about mental health is that if you suffer in silence, your illness will get worse. By the time I was about 14 years old, I was going on a camping trip. It was a school trip to this camp called Mo Ranch. I was in the 7th grade. My sister Laura was a year older than me. She was going to DC, and so my parents had decided I would go stay at my friend Taryn's house, and my mom would take my sister to the airport in the morning to go to DC. And that night, I started having all these thoughts, and I started asking my parents all these questions. Well, what if when I go to Taryn's house, Mom, they put their dog in a kennel? What if something happens to the dog? Do you think that's going to mean it's my fault? Or what if we packed some of the same clothes, and she's going to think I'm copying her? And if I'm copying her, is she going to be mad at me? And if she's mad at me, then what happens? And will it be my fault? And my mom's immediate reaction was, well, then Liz, just don't go to Taryn's house. Like, your brother will take you to school in the morning. And James, I don't know if he remembers this, but my mom talks about this being such an important day for her. Because James took me to school that day, and not to age ourselves, but we used to have CDs, that you would use to listen to music. And James asked me for a CD, and I remember I was putting it in and out, I was counting, I was doing these prayer rituals, and I was trying to get to a right number, something that felt okay. And James didn't really say anything. He kept driving. He dropped me off for this school trip. But what my mom talks about is that was the first time she had ever felt validated by someone else. James came home that night after school and said to my mom, Mom, I don't know what's going on with Liz, but she was doing some really weird behaviors, and it felt really strange. And my mom had been noticing this slowly and surely. She had been noticing little things, but she didn't know who to talk to, and she didn't know what was happening. And, it's hard as a parent to know, when should I be concerned versus, am I making too big of a deal, or is this my own anxiety? And so they kept me, I shouldn't say they kept me, I stayed at this school ranch trip thing for 5 days. My mom came to pick me up on that Friday. And she talks about how when I got off the bus that day, she had this pit in her stomach. And at that moment, she immediately knew this is something that's so much more. I'd lost about 5 or 10 pounds that week. I didn't eat. All these contamination fears were coming up. I didn't shower because it was community showers, so I looked really like you could see from the outside at this point that my mental health condition was starting to be visible externally. And my mom, I remember we got home that night, and the only thing I could say to her is, please don't make me go back to school. And her response was, well, Liz, I won't make you go back if you tell me what's going on. But if you don't tell me what's going on, I can't help you. And I remember crying and shaking. I was on the floor of my room, and I remember saying to my mom, Mom, I don't know what's happening, but I feel like I have all these thoughts, and if I don't do these rituals, something bad's going to happen. And her response as a mom was, well, that's not true. Nothing bad will happen. And I just couldn't shake the feeling. I couldn't take the risk. And I was so lucky that night to realize my champion would be my mom. And so we started searching for help. We started, we live in the world's largest medical center is right here in our backyard. You would think access to good care would be easy and accessible, and it wasn't. We continued to be told that they had never seen a case as severe as mine, there wasn't help available for me, and that we should accept that I'll live in a mental health hospital the rest of my life. My dad talks about being grateful that he is a seller, not a buyer, and he wasn't buying that story. And so, but my parents kept searching, and I think what I was still always really baffled by is that while they're out searching for help, you have a kid continuing to fall apart. And the second C I'll talk about that's critical besides a champion is you have to have a community. I don't know how much Amanda and James knew. I'm sure everything at that point, but actually when they were about 16 or 17, they had to pick me up every day from school. And my mom required them to stay with me until she could get home because she knew I wasn't safe to be alone. And what you see is that this family system of not just the individual, but my sibling and, Amanda are now impacted just as much in different ways because now they have a new responsibility of caretaking. But my mom will tell you that without our community, without our village, she could not have done it. And so we kept searching. I kept getting more and more sick, and I was taking about 6 to 8 hour showers at this point. I was 15, and my mom would have to pull me out of the shower. I couldn't get dressed. I thought an entire side of my body was contaminated, so I would only use one side of my body and wear one pair of jeans and one shirt because I thought the other shirts were all bad and they had bad colors and I might not go to heaven. And I started to do everything in multiples. And for a while, I stopped at the number 7 because it felt good, but then for some reason, I found something wrong with all these different numbers, and eventually I stopped at the number 42. Makes no sense because I was so afraid of the number 6, and 4 plus 2 is 6, but it was my mom's age at the time. So don't ask me why. It felt like the number I needed to do every single thing in. I would wake up in the morning. I would sit up and down 42 times. To get out of bed, I would turn 42 times. I would move my left foot 42 times to take one step. And by the time I'd get to the bathroom, I was exhausted, sweating, crying. I would wash my hands. I would turn the faucet on 42 times, get 42 pumps of soap, rinse my hands off 42 times, turn the faucet back off 42 times. And my OCD decided to say that's one set, you should do 42 sets of 42. And so overnight, our life, not just my life, our family's life, was my mental illness. And for me, a congregation and a champion were the two things that saved my life. They're the two reasons I'm standing here today. I can remember sitting in the pews of my congregation crying and praying for peace. I think the one thing we all know is that there is no greater gift on earth than the gift of peace. And for those of us who are tormented by our thoughts, peace doesn't feel like a reality. And so we kept searching for help, and eventually my parents stumbled across a clinic called the McIngvale Clinic, which is an inpatient program. It was in Topeka, Kansas at the time. And so they put me on a plane. I was 15, and we went to Topeka. When we got to Topeka, I didn't think I was staying. I did everything I could to try to convince my brother, my whole family, I shouldn't say just one person, that I didn't need to stay. And my sister talks about a moment that she still struggles so much with. And it's when we were on the way to treatment, when I continued to cry and apologize. I continued to tell them how sorry I was. How sorry I was for the burden I had become, for the pain I had inflicted, and that I would try to do better. Laura talks about how she can't comprehend that because if I had been diagnosed with cancer, I wouldn't be apologizing for my diagnosis. But for some reason, because it's a mental health condition, we feel like it's our fault. We feel like we did this or we're doing this. And in 2023, my goal is that we can start to treat the brain like we treat the body. And so the next critical C is that you have to find effective care. And so we finally found McIngvale, and my parents went to leave me, and I was terrified, I was vomiting, I was sick, and I was begging them not to leave me at this place. My dad and my sister were completely convinced, and in fact, they were actually really upset with my mom that she was still willing to say she'd leave me. But again, having a champion and having somebody who knows what you need more than you know is a critical piece of this journey. And I got amazing care, and it saved my life. In many different ways, I still came back and relapsed and struggled, but one other thing happened that day. I was crying, I was so sick, and I remember I sat down on the couch at the clinic, and I looked over, I was sitting next to a young, thin, redhead girl named Amy. And she looked at me, and all she said is, "It's okay, I cried too." And for the first time in my life, I felt a sense of community. I felt this need that was starting to be filled to where there was this understanding that I wasn't alone. Now, her and I have different diagnoses and different struggles and different treatment courses, but it was a recognition that the pain I was dealing with, I wasn't alone in that. And it is so powerful. And so I got effective treatment. It changed and saved my life. I came back and really continued to struggle on and off for the next 15 years of my life. I started to believe and accept that my mental illness was a part of me. It was something that would define me. And in fact, I thought the best I could ever get was to learn to function with really bad OCD. And that is a message we send every day to those individuals that are struggling. That if you can function, you're winning, right? When I got a job, it was like, oh my gosh, you got a job. This is amazing, Liz. Versus like, hey, like if you're still struggling, we can still get you and hope and work towards freedom, not functioning. But what happened is during this time, my dad, being who he is, threw me into advocacy. And he really had this belief that, we can take this pain and turn it into a purpose. And so we started telling our story publicly. And it was such a huge moment for me because it was the first time in my life where this challenge made sense, where my pain had a purpose, and where I could take my struggle and turn it into a strength. I could start to make sense of why I had to deal with this battle, right? There was something good that could come out of it, and it was helping other people. And for me, I think that's a critical piece in our life. How can we take our own struggles and turn them into strengths so that they don't define us in this negative way, but instead they can lead us resiliently to others and to service, which is undoubtedly the greatest gift we can give ourselves, is giving to other people. And so, I guess it's 6 days ago, or 7, I don't know, 5 days ago, I'm not good at math. The degrees don't say much, obviously, was Mother's Day. And I'm going to read a letter that my mom wrote to me because I think it helps you see and understand how moms can feel when we think about those people that have to champion for those of us when we can't be our own. It says, Liz, a year has passed since I made the hardest decision, and I hope one of the best that I'll ever have to make. When I look back on this past year, I'm so glad to have been so lucky to have a daughter as strong as you are. A year ago, I felt so desperate. I cried every day over you, frustrated that I was unable to help you and afraid that the decisions I would make, like sending you to Menninger, wouldn't be the right ones. It was something I anguished over for weeks, but I knew I couldn't help my daughter get better. I hoped I was putting her somewhere that would know what to do. I still cry at times when I think of what you went through. I feel sick every time I think of you telling me that you thought we were putting you in that hospital forever. I hope you can forgive my ignorance on how we did it, causing you a despair a child should never have to face. I look every day at you and am so very proud of you and what you've done and continue to do daily to be the person that you are. Everyone always acts like you're cured because you're doing so well, but I know you still fight your battles every day. When I look at you, I know that, and my heart almost breaks sometimes when I think of how hard you have to work. You are truly so unbelievable. I want you to know, Liz, how much I love you, and I speak for your father as well. He may not show it the same way. I love you more than I think you'll ever know. I love you so much that love is what kept me strong enough to send you to Menninger. I knew in my heart that I had to love you enough to break my own heart and risk everything to help you. I thank God every day it was the right decision. You're such a wonderful daughter, and you never cause us any grief. I want to let you know how proud I am and how much I love you. An hour doesn't pass in the day that I don't think about how strong you are, how well you fight your daily battles, and I love you every second of it. I want you to remember that every minute of every day, I love you and I'm proud of you, and I'm here whenever you need it. My mom is the first person I still call when I'm struggling and the first person I send a message to when I'm proud of something. I thank God every day that I had a champion that I needed when I didn't know I needed it. And today I'm here standing as someone who, my entire life I said I would never have kids because I couldn't imagine the thought of my own children potentially having anxiety or OCD one day. I have a wild 2-year-old and 10-month-old. And what I can tell you is that when people still say to me, Liz, what was the moment that shifted? What was like the thing for you that made it click? I've struggled my entire life. But the second I had a kid, I realized there was a purpose so much bigger than me. It is our job to help people find their purpose. Because when we do, we're fighting for something other than ourselves. And the power in that is untangible. It's critical that we have a community, a champion, good care, and a congregation. That can be found right here. Don't lose sight of that. Help create that. Help lead people to that, because it can change and save your life, just like it did mine. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. McIngvale, for sharing your incredible story. I think everyone here appreciates you, your honesty, and coming out like this. It's just so brave, and I hope that you helped change some people here tonight and let people know that they're not alone. So thank you so much for your bravery in speaking to us tonight. And on behalf of the synagogue, I'd like to give you a few token gifts of our appreciation. Number one, I know how much your family is charitable and loves philanthropy and helping those that cannot help themselves. So we have a tzedakah box, and tzedakah in Hebrew means charity. So I know how much that means to you and your family, so I hope that you can put this in your house, fill it with some money, and give it to the charity of your choice. The second thing we have for you is a hamsa. And a hamsa is a protective sign. It brings its owner happiness, luck, health, and good fortune, and it also comes with a prayer. It reads, "Let no sadness come to this heart. Let no trouble come to these arms. Let no conflict come to these eyes. Let my soul be filled with the blessing of joy and with peace." And we hope that is true for you and your whole family. And thank you so much again for being here.